In a small neighborhood on the outskirts of Cebu, where the echo of tricycles blended with the chatter of street vendors, lived a boy who never imagined that his voice would someday travel far. Beyond the rusted rooftops around him, his neighbors knew him as the quiet kid, who spent more time humming than talking, and whose eyes always drifted toward the old, second-hand radio sitting in the family's living room. That radio was his world. It was scratched, dented, and older than he was, but when it played music, everything around him felt new again. His mother always said he had been singing since he could talk, but even she didn't realize that what he carried inside him was something extraordinary. He didn't grow up with much. Their home was simple, made of patched-up wood, and painted a color that looked different, depending on where the sunlight hit it. His mother worked long hours at a small bakery, kneading dough before sunrise and returning home, smelling of flour and exhaustion. But every night, no matter how tired she was, she made sure he had time to practice. She didn't fully understand the way his voice worked, but she could feel the emotion behind every note he released. It wasn't just singing, it was like he was opening a door to something bigger than their tiny home. One day his uncle came to visit and brought an old USB filled with classic music. Inside were songs from a voice that would change the boy's life forever. The first time he heard Elvis Presley, he stopped breathing for a moment, stunned by how a single person could sound that powerful and that vulnerable at the same time. He played the songs every day after school, memorizing the softness, the grit, and the magic behind Elvis's voice. Soon he wasn't just singing, he was transforming, learning how to express himself in ways he had never understood. People in the neighborhood started noticing. They would walk by and pause, surprised to hear this familiar yet unbelievable sound, coming from a boy who barely reached their shoulders. Some laughed and called him the eldest kid. Others encouraged him, saying he had a gift that could take him somewhere, far from the narrow alleys he knew so well. But no matter how many people cheered him on, he still felt shy. He wasn't sure the world wanted to hear a Filipino kid singing songs from an era long gone, still deep inside. There was a spark, a tiny voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, he was meant for something bigger. His mother knew the spark was real. She had seen the way music changed him, how it helped him forget the noise of life and focus on something pure. So when Auditions for America's Got Talent opened online, she didn't ask for his permission. She recorded a video of him singing, uploaded it, and prayed silently that someone out there would listen. She didn't expect a reply. She just hoped the world would feel the same thing she felt whenever he opened his mouth to sing. Weeks passed with no news, and life returned to the usual routine. Then one late evening, while the sun was barely scraping the horizon, an email arrived. It wasn't fancy or dramatic. It simply said that the AGT producers wanted him to come for an audition. His mother stared at the screen for a long time, unsure if she was imagining it, but when the reality sank in, she called him over and showed him the message. His heart raced so fast he thought it might burst. He had never even left the islands, and suddenly he was being asked to fly across the world and perform on a stage he had only seen in videos. The journey to America felt unreal. The airport lights, the unfamiliar voices, the endless announcements. It was all overwhelming. His mother held his hand every step of the way, making sure he didn't drift too far into his nerves. They landed in a place so big it almost scared him. Skyscrapers rose like giants, and the streets were filled with people who seemed to know exactly where they were going. He felt small, but he also felt alive. The day of the audition came faster than he expected. Backstage, he could hear other performers warming up, each with their own story and dream. Some were laughing nervously. Others were practicing until their voices cracked. He sat quietly next to his mother, gripping the microphone they had given him. She squeezed his shoulder and reminded him that, no matter what happened, she was proud of him. That was all he needed to hear. When his name was finally called, he walked onto the stage with trembling hands. The bright lights blinded him for a second, and he froze, unsure of where to look. Then he saw the judges' faces: Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, and Howie Mandel. They looked at him with curiosity, maybe expecting a nervous kid who would sing something modern and safe. But he knew something they didn't. He wasn't there to copy a legend. He was there to honor a voice that shaped his childhood. Simon asked him what he would be performing, and when he softly replied, the audience murmured. Elvis Presley wasn't a common choice for a young performer, especially someone who didn't grow up anywhere near the era of rock and roll, but Simon nodded, intrigued. and gave him the signal to begin. The first note left his mouth and everything changed. The room fell silent. It wasn't just that he sounded like Elvis. It was the emotion behind his voice, the way he carried each word like it was something sacred. His tone was rich, warm, and hauntingly familiar. People in the audience leaned forward, stunned by how someone so young could channel something so powerful. Simon's expression shifted from curiosity to shock. Then to admiration, the judges exchanged glances, whispering to each other, unable to believe what they were hearing. He wasn't imitating, he wasn't pretending. He was living the music as he reached the chorus. The audience erupted, but he didn't let it distract him. He kept singing, pouring his heart into every lyric. For those few minutes, he forgot the cameras, the lights, the pressure. He was back in his small home in Cebu, singing to the cracked radio that had raised him. And the world listened when he finished. The entire theater rose to their feet. The applause was deafening, echoing through every corner of the stage. Simon didn't smile right away. Instead, he looked at the boy with a seriousness that made the moment heavier. Then he leaned forward and said that he had just witnessed something truly special, something rare, something unforgettable. The boy's eyes filled with tears, not because of the praise, but because he had done something he never believed he could accomplish. His mother backstage cried openly, clutching her hands to her chest as she watched the audience cheer for her son. The judges spoke one by one. They praised his control, his tone, his maturity. They told him his voice felt timeless, as if he had pulled a piece of music history back into the present. Each word they said felt like a dream he was scared to wake up from. Then came the moment that would define everything. Simon reached toward the golden buzzer. Time slowed. The judges looked at him. The audience went wild. Lights exploded in shimmering gold as confetti rained from the ceiling. The boy stood frozen, his hands covering his face, overwhelmed by the realization that his life had changed. In a single heartbeat golden buzzer, he walked off stage into his mother's arms. Shaking with emotion, she held him tightly, whispering words he could barely hear over the crowd. They weren't rich, they didn't have connections. They came from a place most people had never heard of. And yet here they were being celebrated by thousands of people who believed in the same dream he had carried. Since the day he first heard Elvis Presley sing, the video of his performance spread across the internet in hours. People from around the world were amazed by this young Filipino kid, with a voice that felt both nostalgic and new. Music critics reacted, fans celebrated. Elvis lovers commented that the spirit of the king lived on in him. It didn't matter who he was or where he came from. His voice transcended everything. But even after all the noise and excitement, he stayed humble. He remembered where he came from. He stayed connected to the simple life he grew up in, keeping his family close and his heart grounded. He continued singing not for fame, but because music was the one thing that had always made him feel whole. As the competition continued, he grew more confident, learning from every stage, every rehearsal, every moment under the spotlight. The pressure was heavy, but he carried it with grace. He didn't want to be Elvis. He wanted to be himself. A Filipino kid with a voice inspired by a legend, but shaped by his own struggles, dreams, and hopes. No matter how far he went in the competition, the world had already seen something extraordinary. A boy from a little home thousands of miles away had stepped onto one of the biggest stages on earth and proven that talent has no boundaries, no nationality, no limits. He had shown that sometimes the most unexpected voices come from the most unexpected places, and for millions watching around the world, that performance wasn't just a moment. It was a reminder that greatness can rise from anywhere, as long as there's a heart brave enough to chase it.